But once the deal is done, you need to poker face it up to the team, to your clients. These people are not your friends at the end of the day. You know what they are? They are team members now, they're clients, and you need to run the company line. Hey everybody, I am here shooting this podcast on vacation. So if you hear the ocean in the background, maybe a child screaming for a popsicle, or just the general sound of clinking cocktails, that is what we're dealing with. And that is the life of a business owner. Also doing this with the shades on because it's about 90 something degrees here in Florida. And you can see my lovely sunburn poking out. But we're here today as you're listening to this in October. That's how far out we get some of our content done. We're talking to you about selling your agency and the process of you as the seller staying on board. Now, I want to be upfront. The context of this podcast isn't necessarily in the vein of like some of the private equity deals where it is baked in. You are operating your agency, and that is the deal. You are operating it. There's great incentives for you to stay on track with it. I'm talking more about the conventional side of things, which is selling the agency to another agency owner, maybe a friend, maybe somebody in the community. And, we're merging into less of a corporate setting and far more into just two businesses merging together. If you are selling to somebody else, I think this is a phenomenal time in your life. You've obviously decided that it's just time to think through what's next. It might be time to retire, or you know what? You've just had some honest moments with yourself about, hey, you know what? The day-to-day operations of running just aren't for you. Maybe managing people or accounting or payroll or just that scale of running the business it's hard to get to. And with other resources, you could be much more successful. So if you're looking to sell and you want to stay on or have to stay on, and I say that because sometimes for tax purposes, sometimes for income purposes, sometimes it's just I'm not ready to give it all in. I think it's really important as you go into these transactions to think through those steps. What do you truly want as the seller? And be honest, because I think so many times I see these agency acquisitions happen. And unfortunately, the downside is this, which is they happen and everybody says, oh, nothing's going to change. Everything's going to stay the same. It's literally impossible for that to happen. So if you're going into it with that on your mind, I want you to take it right off and say, yeah, things are going to change. You're going to have different carriers, different tech stack. In all reality, as the seller going into a new organization, you are now a team member. You are not the owner. Now you may be a manager, but there will always be hierarchy. You have sold your business. You have been paid for it or in the process of getting paid for it. And now merging up two cultures. I like to equate this to the fact that I don't know as though my husband and I would be actually married. And I don't know if I would have been married to anybody, just for the records. They do with you. When we moved in together, it was out of desperation. Okay. The economy had tanked out. We were in our 20s. The company I worked for had actually filed bankruptcy and closed at the time. The company that he worked for, he was in the mortgage industry, that had gone downhill. And it was like, hey, we like each other. We probably need to consolidate some stuff. Let's do it. And I just remember thinking to myself, holy macaroni, if we had not lived together and figured out that he leaves his socks on the freaking floor all the time. And the man has never once, I don't think, put a dish in the dishwasher. And I am a super morning person and I go to bed super early. Also, when I am stressed in the moment, I am a raging jerk. And so I say this because if you've run a business, your norms, your way of doing things are the way that you're expecting everything else to run. And it's just not that way. There will be the Brady Bunch moments of, it's Taco Tuesday, but they eat meatloaf on Tuesday. There's just things that will be different. And a lot of times it might even have to do with what you write. Does everybody put things on EFT, or do you not take cash, or premium financing, or turning away certain types of business? They're just going to have to be now part of the norm. You have to remember you are selling your business. And so one step I always look into is saying, you have to really, really, really stop as a seller and why do I want to stay on? Is it purely financial? And if that's the case, you need to have a job description that states what you're here to do, and you need to honor that. You need to let go of the fact you are no longer an owner. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have influence. It doesn't mean that you're not a leader. It doesn't mean that you don't have any respect. but you are going to have to comply. And for so many business owners, that would be hard. I say this because for me included, I think all the time, like if something we sold this business, which is not on the cards, but I would leave. Like I might stay on and be on call for things. I might stay on for 90 days. But at that point after this, I would not, I just not in my DNA. And by the way, I have seen many agency owners sell and it is in their DNA and it works out just fine. But you do want to make sure you get a very clear job description nailed down. And if the person that you're selling to maybe is a little wishy-washy on this, take the leadership role and say, here's what I think the boundaries are. Get it clarified, get it in writing, get it stuck to. The next thing, make sure you really want to. Like in your heart, this is truly what you want to do, right? You want to stay on, you want to add value. And what is that role? Are you producing? Are you on retention? Are you mentoring other producers? How long are you planning to stay on? If you're in the retirement phase, you might say, I'm going to stay on for 3 years, honor that. Or I'm going to stay on for a year, then I'm going to go back, I'm going to go back, honor that. But I think I've seen so many people sell their agencies and stay on as producers, and all of a sudden they're well into their 70s and 80s, maintaining a few accounts. The books are shrinking. They're not doing technology or carriers. So the support team is doing a ton of work and the books aren't necessarily growing. And because they're sort of part-time producing, part-time account managing, it gets a little sticky and messy. And at some point, somebody has to address it. So understand why. The other thing I say, if you're selling your agency into another agency, you really want to just be upfront where your boundaries are. You really do this. Do you want to learn a whole management system? Maybe you do, maybe no. If you want to say, do you want to learn all that new carrier portfolio? Ask the agency owner, what are your agency standards? What are your norms? How do you process things? Do you do renewal reviews? When do you reshop somebody? Ask the questions to identify how big that jump looks. And there's the art of any deal where you can sell an agency for XYZ because it's the right thing to do. And there's the idea that you could just stay on in the background. Another thing I always like to say when selling an agency is if you do sell as a person selling, your emotional intelligence has to click in post-sale. So they say the greatest deals in the world are where the seller feels like they sold for too little and the buyer feels like they paid too much. Okay. And I truly believe this, right? Like looking back, you always think your business is worth more. You always think maybe if you thought a little harder, the deal is done. Stop living in the past. You have to look in the future. And you can't let your discomfort on the deal or things that maybe you wish would have done differently. I mean, let's be honest. You don't sell your book of business all the time. This is probably a once in a lifetime experience for many people. Some people do it a couple times, but by far the vast majority do it once. So you can talk to your friends, you can talk to other people about it, but no matter what, you're going to learn, you're going to make some mistakes and you're going to have some things you did really well. And here's things you wish you did differently. But once the deal is done, you need to poker face it up to the team, to your clients. These people are not your friends at the end of the day. You know what they are? They are team members now, they're clients, and you need to run the company line. And I do see a lot of times people have a strong problem with this. Or another conflict I see is management styles. Maybe your management style is, hey, the team does all this stuff for me. The other team might be like, hey, the producers do this. These are all things that just come up with lots of communication up front. I think so many people get so excited about the deal and the pluses that we forget to talk about some of the difficult things. Hence why most people do, marriage counseling before getting married. I wish that there was more business owner counseling before merging up. And hey, maybe deals wouldn't get done. Maybe this would be a deal killer, not a deal enabler. And I can understand why we might not want that either. But, if you have issues with it, don't air that public laundry out for the simple reason that it was your deal. You said yes, you agreed. These are where the chips have fallen. And now move on. You have the money in your bank account. Everything is well. So, we say these things just to give people some tips and tricks because these mergers are happening so much. There's a lot of agency owners in retirement phase that are looking to move on. And some of the deals go really well and some of them don't. And I think the ones that don't end up happening because there's rose-colored glasses. There has not been the depth of communication. People are like all upside, right? Because when you're selling your agency, you're in a sales process too, right? The buyer is selling you on why to sell to them. And so in a sales process, they don't always tell you all the dirty little secrets of everything or the things that aren't right. But let me say this, every business has things that aren't right. I have things that aren't right. You have things that aren't right. And so the more communication you have and the more you just chill and relax and realize you've sold, you've got all the stress off your head. You've got all the worries about some of the business ownership things. Now you just have to focus over here, let it go, play your Frozen tape, sing the Elsa song, let it go, and let the other agency take her out. Unless you're willing to buy the agency back, this is where we're at. So I just think for so many people, they mistake the true identity change that's going to happen. And that's where things get a little mixed up. If I've owned a business, I've owned APP now for 9 years, over 9 years and a half. And it would be very difficult for me to step into the shoes of an employee without maybe like a detox period, like really understanding, hey, there's hierarchy and hierarchy has to be respected in order to work. And in exchange for that hierarchy, I might get to go to vacation and not have to do podcasts. Or, I take some of these other worries off because I can escalate them and put them with people where that's their job. And when you run a business, the buck stops with you. And so on those hard days, because there will be hard days on any transition, any transformation, even the most positive ones, there's still some times where you're like, oh, didn't think about that. These are the things you need to consider and reconsider. And remind yourself why you did it. And remind yourself that you're here and you can learn from this. I will leave you with this. I think one of the things I see a lot of times the seller is a smaller agency getting sold to a larger agency. Again, a lot of times. Sometimes there's equality. Rarely a smaller agency buys a bigger agency, but sometimes it does happen. So I also want you to consider the fact that if you're on the smaller getting sold to someone bigger, that they have become bigger and successful for key reasons, even if it's things that you don't necessarily agree with. One of the things you hear all the time is some of the larger agencies, shops, more the national brokerages, they turn away small commercial deals and people are appalled at this. Well, if you had X number of policyholders to manage and you're looking at your P&L and you're looking at your resources and it's hard to find people, and your profit margin you're trying to target is X, you have to make those decisions because doing the math and having the scope of CFO knowledge, the knowledge is power to understand that. Now, on the small guys, you might say, hey, this needs to be more stuff. And that's fine. But just know that these policies and standards, it might be different than what you're used to, been put into play because of the scale of the business. And it is different when you start really thinking about how you scale a business. I know we've been focused on that. And I can tell you, it does change your mindset on what you need to focus your time and attention on. You only have so many resources, and the distribution of those resources has to go to the highest best use. And so maybe before you had an abundance of resources and taking that $500 pop is no big deal. But in an agency where maybe resources are lower, they're short staffed, taking on some of those smaller accounts takes them away from some of the larger profit margin items. So those are our tips if you're the seller of what to think through, how to think through this. If you're buying, this is also good for you to know how to structure these deals to not have those wrinkles and the hiccups later on. We have a whole blog associated with this, so check it out. We do agency assessment. So maybe if you have done this and you're feeling those culture shock pains, call us so that we can help you work through those things. But we're here for anything that you guys need. There will be another podcast posting later this week where we discuss the other side of the equation. So anyway, I'm going to go back to my vacation. But you guys, go have yourself a great rest of your day.